Listen to your soul, not your fears. Buddhist teaching. In every human life, there comes a moment when the noise of the world becomes louder than the whispers of the heart. This noise takes many forms. It may appear as fear, anxiety, social pressure, expectations, regrets, old wounds, or the voices of others who insist they know what is best for you. Over time, this noise becomes so constant that people forget what their own soul sounds like. They forget that there is a deeper intelligence within them, one that existed long before any fear, one that knows the truth even when the mind trembles. Buddhist wisdom teaches that fear is not an enemy, but a fog that covers the inner light. The soul never loses its clarity, but fear blinds us to it. The purpose of spiritual practice is to learn how to hear again, to reconnect with the silent guide that has always walked with us. To listen to the soul is to return to a place of clarity, compassion, courage, and calm. It is to understand that the fears you experience are temporary reactions of the mind, while the truth within you is timeless. This teaching is not about denying the existence of fear. Fear is part of being human, but fear should not be the master of your decisions. In Buddhism, fear is considered a mental formation, a conditioned response, a cloud that drifts across the sky of the mind. It is real in experience, but it is not your essence. The soul, or the deeper consciousness, is the unchanging ground beneath all experiences. When you listen to fear, you live in contraction. When you listen to the soul, you open to life. The goal of this teaching is to help you understand how to distinguish between the two, how to silence the noise of fear, and how to trust the quiet wisdom that lives within. As you walk through the lessons that follow, you will be invited to observe yourself in a new way. You will be guided to see how fear disguises itself as logic, how anxiety disguises itself as caution, and how self-doubt disguises itself as humility. You will learn that listening to the soul requires a kind of inner stillness, a presence, a willingness to pause and feel before reacting. You will be invited to explore the mind with honesty, but also with compassion. Buddhist wisdom does not demand perfection. It invites awareness. And through awareness, transformation becomes natural and inevitable. This text will explore 5 deep pillars of Buddhist insight on how to hear your soul more clearly and how to stop letting fear dictate your life. Each topic is written as a continuous meditation, long, reflective, and immersive, so that by the end you will not only understand the ideas intellectually, but feel them shaping your inner world. Now, let us begin with the first teaching. The soul speaks through stillness, while fear speaks through noise. Fear rarely speaks quietly. It rushes in with urgency, with pressure, with agitation. It demands immediate answers. It creates stories of danger, of failure, of isolation, of loss. It paints the mind with worst-case scenarios and convinces you that these imaginings are truth. This is why fear is loud. It must be loud, because if you were still for even a moment, you would see through it. The soul, on the other hand, does not pressure, does not shout, does not rush. It speaks in calm, subtle impressions, in intuitive knowing, in the gentle pull toward what feels right, even when you cannot explain why. Learning to listen to the soul means learning to recognize the difference between noise and silence, between urgency and clarity, between agitation and presence. Most people live in a state of mental turbulence. The mind becomes filled with thoughts that collide, expectations that suffocate, and fears that echo from old memories. This turbulence is not natural. It is learned. When a child is born, they do not fear the future. They do not judge themselves. They do not worry about failure or rejection. Their consciousness is open, spacious, free. Their soul is alive within them, unburdened by the layers that life gradually constructs. Over time, experiences, conditioning, social pressures, and emotional wounds create patterns of fear. These patterns become habitual responses, and soon the person believes these responses are part of who they are. But Buddhist wisdom reveals that these patterns are only visitors in the mind. They are not the truth of your being. Stillness helps you see this. Stillness does not mean the absence of external noise. It means the absence of internal chaos. It is possible to sit in complete silence and have a storm raging inside the mind, just as it is possible to sit in a busy environment and feel a deep inner calm. Stillness is a state of consciousness in which the mind is no longer reacting to every stimulus, no longer chasing every thought, no longer being pushed around by fear. In stillness, the surface of the mind becomes clear enough for the deeper truth to rise. Just as water becomes reflective when it is undisturbed, the soul becomes audible when the mind is quiet. The problem is that people have been conditioned to fear stillness. When the world is quiet, the mind begins to reveal the thoughts and emotions that have been avoided. Pain rises, memories surface, doubts appear. But this rising is not punishment. It is healing. Stillness reveals what needs attention. Fear wants to avoid this process. Fear thrives when you stay busy, distracted, rushed, overwhelmed. It wants you to run because when you stop, its illusions dissolve. This is why fear is loud. It tries to dominate your attention. Listening to the soul requires the courage to stop running. In Buddhist practice, meditation is not simply a technique. It is a way of returning to your true nature. When you sit with yourself, without distractions, you begin to feel the difference between what is temporary and what is permanent, between what is conditioned and what is innate. At first, the noise of the mind may intensify. This is normal. It is like stirring muddy water. Everything becomes cloudy. But if you remain still, the mud settles. Thoughts continue to appear, but they no longer control you. Emotions continue to arise, but they no longer define you. The soul begins to speak. Many people misunderstand intuition. They think intuition is a sudden feeling or a magical insight, but intuition is much deeper. It is the silent knowing that arises when the mind is aligned with the truth of the soul. It is not emotional, it is not reactive, it is not driven by fear. Intuition is the natural clarity that emerges when your consciousness is not polluted by noise. It is the voice of your deeper self, the self that is not afraid, not confused, not divided. Intuition is the soul speaking to the mind. But even intuition can be drowned when fear is too loud. Fear creates tension. It speeds up the heart, tightens the breath, narrows the vision, and scatters thought. It makes you believe that you must act immediately, that you must protect yourself, that danger is near even when no danger exists. This false urgency disconnects you from wisdom. Buddhist teachings encourage you to pause, not because inaction is always the answer, but because clarity arises when reactivity stops. When you take a moment to breathe, to ground yourself, to become aware of what is happening inside you, the mind begins to shift from panic to presence, and from presence, the voice of the soul becomes accessible again. One of the most profound insights of Buddhism is the understanding that fear is rooted in attachment. Attachment to outcomes, attachment to identities, attachment to the need for certainty or approval. When you fear losing something, it is because you are attached to it. When you fear the future, it is because you are attached to control. When you fear judgment, it's because you are attached to the image you believe you must protect. The soul, however, is not attached. It simply is. It does not cling, it does not grasp, it does not depend on external validation. It is free. When you listen to the soul, you begin to loosen the grip of attachment. When attachment weakens, fear loses its strength. Stillness helps reveal this truth in a simple yet powerful way. When you are still, you see your thoughts for what they are, passing events in consciousness. They come and go like clouds. Some are pleasant, some are uncomfortable, some are fearful, some are hopeful. But they all pass. Fear is just another cloud. It may feel overwhelming when it arrives, but it cannot stay forever. When you realize that fear is impermanent, you begin to take it less seriously. You begin to see that you can observe fear without obeying it. This is the beginning of liberation. Your soul speaks through the spaces between thoughts. It speaks through intuition, through inner peace, through a feeling of alignment. You know this feeling even if you cannot describe it. It is the sense of rightness you experience when you make a decision that comes from truth rather than pressure. It is the feeling of relief that arises when you stop pretending. It is the expansion you feel when you choose authenticity over fear. Your soul never speaks in panic. It never confuses you. It never shouts. If the voice inside you is loud, anxious, or urgent, it is fear, not your soul. To listen to the soul means to cultivate inner conditions in which its voice can be heard. This requires intentional practice. It requires becoming aware of when fear is speaking. It requires asking yourself whether your decisions are coming from pressure or from clarity. It requires slowing down enough to feel your inner world. The world teaches speed, reaction, and constant movement. The soul teaches presence, reflection, and conscious action. One is noise, the other is truth. The more you practice stillness, the easier it becomes to distinguish fear from wisdom. Fear always contracts your energy. Wisdom expands it. Fear creates confusion. Wisdom brings clarity. Fear focuses on what might go wrong. Wisdom focuses on what is true in this moment. Fear takes you away from yourself. Wisdom brings you back. Listening to the soul is an act of remembering who you really are beneath all the layers of conditioning. As you continue your journey, you may notice that sometimes the soul's guidance leads you into uncertainty, but never into confusion. Uncertainty is natural. Confusion is created by fear. The soul understands that life is unfolding in ways the mind cannot predict. It knows that becoming who you are meant to be requires stepping into the unknown at times. Fear wants security. The soul wants truth. You must choose which one to follow. You learn to listen to the soul, not by force, but by attention, by gently returning to yourself, by allowing silence to reveal what your heart has been trying to tell you for years. The more you trust this inner voice, the stronger it becomes. Eventually, it becomes your compass. It becomes the foundation of your decisions, the guiding light through every situation. Fear will still appear because it is part of the human experience. But when you know how to remain still, fear can no longer control you. When you recognize the difference between the noise of the mind and the wisdom of the soul, your entire reality shifts. You begin to live from a place of depth rather than reaction. You begin to feel grounded even in uncertainty. You begin to walk with confidence, not because life becomes easier, but because you are aligned with truth. Listening to your soul is ultimately an act of freedom. It is choosing authenticity over fear, clarity over confusion, presence over reaction. It is discovering the silent sanctuary within you, a place fear cannot reach. When you live from this space, your life becomes not only calmer but more meaningful. You begin to live with intention, with courage, with compassion. And the more you listen, the more you trust. The more you trust, the more you awaken to the wisdom that has always been inside you. If this content is helping you reconnect with your inner wisdom, remember to subscribe to the channel so you never miss teachings like this. When you trust your soul, fear loses its power. Fear gains its strength from one place only, your belief in it. It has no power on its own. It does not possess truth. It does not carry wisdom. It cannot predict the future, and it does not know who you truly are. Fear survives through the energy you feed it. Every time you believe its stories, every time you react to its warnings, Every time you allow it to shape your decisions, you reinforce its presence within you. But when you turn your attention elsewhere, when you begin to trust the quiet voice of the soul instead of the trembling voice of fear, something remarkable begins to happen. Fear weakens, its grip loosens, its authority dissolves. The same fear that once felt overwhelming becomes nothing more than a passing shadow. The transformation does not happen because fear disappears, but because you stop bowing to it. To trust your soul is to shift your center of gravity. Most people live anchored in the mind, especially in the mind's stories of danger, expectation, comparison, and insecurity. The mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. It is shaped by everything it has experienced, everything it has been told, everything it remembers, everything it fears might occur. The mind collects impressions and builds narratives. Some are useful, but many are distortions created by pain, repetition, or conditioning. When you listen only to the mind, you live in limitation. When you listen to the soul, you enter a larger space within yourself, one where possibilities open, where clarity expands, where courage grows naturally. Trusting the soul means no longer giving fear the final say. But this shift does not happen overnight. It requires understanding, awareness, patience, and practice. Fear speaks first because it is fast. The soul speaks true because it is deep. Fear reacts, the soul responds. Fear contracts, the soul expands. When you begin to observe these differences within your own experience, something inside you awakens. You realize that fear is not a sign that something is wrong. It is simply a sign that something inside you is sensitive. You realize that trusting your soul is not about eliminating fear, but rising above it. Buddhist wisdom teaches that fear is a wave, while the soul is the ocean. The wave may be intense, but it cannot harm the depths beneath it. Fear often disguises itself as logic or responsibility. It tries to convince you that avoiding discomfort is the same thing as staying safe. It tells you that stepping into your truth is risky, that following your heart is foolish, that turning inward is impractical. But the soul sees beyond these illusions. The soul knows that growth requires movement, that wisdom requires introspection, that authenticity requires courage. Fear wants you to stay where you are because it only survives in familiarity. The soul wants you to evolve because it knows your potential is far greater than your patterns. Trusting the soul begins with recognizing when fear is speaking. Fear always carries a sense of urgency. It pushes you to decide quickly, to protect yourself, to anticipate problems that have not happened. The soul never rushes you. Its guidance is patient, grounded, and steady. When a thought pressures you, it is fear. When a thought supports you, even when it challenges you, it is likely wisdom. One of the most profound skills you can develop is the ability to pause whenever fear arises. When you pause, even for a moment, fear loses its momentum. You create a gap, a small space where awareness enters. And in that space, the soul has the opportunity to speak. This pause is the door to inner freedom. Without it, you react to fear automatically. With it, you begin to see fear as an object, not as your identity. You can observe it, question it, and ultimately choose whether or not to follow it. This is the essence of mindfulness. Awareness breaks the spell. When you bring consciousness to fear, you remove its disguise. You see it for what it is, a conditioned response, not a prophecy. And when you see it clearly, the authority it once held begins to fade. Trusting your soul also means trusting that there is a deeper intelligence guiding your life. This does not mean believing in destiny or fate. It means recognizing that the part of you connected to truth is wiser than the part of you controlled by fear. When you make decisions based on fear, the path becomes narrow, heavy, and exhausting. When you make decisions based on soul alignment, the path becomes more open, even if it remains uncertain. The difference lies not in external circumstances, but in your internal state. Fear-based decisions drain you because they come from contraction. Soul-based decisions strengthen you because they come from authenticity. Many people believe that trusting the soul is risky because it often leads them into unknown territory. But the unknown is only frightening when you face it from the mind. When you approach the unknown from the soul, it becomes a place of potential. It becomes a space where creativity, freedom, and transformation are possible. The soul sees possibilities the mind cannot perceive. It looks beyond limitations, beyond expectations, beyond fears. When you trust it, you shift from surviving to living. Fear will argue that you need guarantees before taking steps forward. It will tell you that the future must be secured before you can act. But the soul teaches that life unfolds through movement, not stagnation. Buddhist teachings emphasize that the path appears only as you begin to walk. If you wait for certainty, you will wait forever. Fear demands certainty. The soul operates through truth. When you take a step aligned with your inner truth, the next step becomes clearer. And with each step, fear loses its influence. Another reason fear has so much power is that it draws its strength from the past. It uses old wounds, old memories, old failures, old judgments to create new barriers. It repeats the same stories until you mistake them for intuition. But the soul is rooted in the present. It does not carry past narratives. It does not cling to old identities. It is not limited by what happened before. When you connect with the present moment, you connect with the soul. That is why presence is so powerful. It pulls you out of the mind's old stories and brings you into a space where fear cannot dominate. Trusting the soul means learning to differentiate between the voice of fear and the voice of truth. Fear focuses on loss. Truth focuses on alignment. Fear looks for threats. Truth looks for meaning. Fear wants control. Truth wants freedom. Fear speaks loudly. Truth speaks quietly. When you begin to ask yourself simple questions, is this fear or truth? Is this contraction or clarity? Is this panic or wisdom? You start to strengthen the connection with your soul. Over time, this becomes natural. The moment fear arises, you recognize it. And in that recognition, you are no longer controlled by it. The soul communicates in subtle ways. Sometimes it reveals itself as a sense of peace, even when circumstances are uncertain. Sometimes it appears as a quiet inner knowing that does not need explanation. Sometimes it speaks through discomfort that pushes you toward necessary change. Sometimes it reveals truth through silence. The more attention you give to these signals, the more clearly you hear them. Trust grows through intimacy. The more time you spend connected to your soul, the more familiar its voice becomes. Fear also weakens when you stop giving it meaning. Most people interpret fear as a sign that they should withdraw. But fear is often the mind's reaction to expansion. Fear arises when you are stepping into something unfamiliar, something that challenges old identities or comfort zones. If you misinterpret growth-induced fear as danger, you remain trapped. But if you understand that fear is simply a sign that you are entering a new level of yourself, you stop reacting to it as an alarm and begin seeing it as part of the journey. In Buddhist thought, emotions like fear become suffering only when we resist them. The moment you fight fear, suppress it or hate it, you strengthen it. But when you observe fear without judgment, its intensity decreases. When you allow fear to arise and pass naturally, it cannot control you. This is not avoidance, it is mastery. You are not running from fear. You are witnessing it from a place of awareness. Awareness is the soul's language. The more aware you become, the more clearly you see that fear has no depth. It is all surface. It is a wave that rises and falls, but the ocean beneath remains unaffected. Trusting your soul also means trusting your capacity to handle whatever comes. Fear undermines this trust by telling you that you are not ready, not strong enough, not wise enough, not capable enough, but the soul knows differently. It recognizes your inner strength, your resilience, your ability to grow through challenges. It guides you toward experiences that will awaken your potential. When you trust that you can handle life, fear loses its foundation. Fear thrives on self-doubt. The soul thrives on self-recognition. The more you listen to your soul, the more you begin to act from love instead of fear. Love is not romantic emotion here. It is expansion, openness, truth, connection. When your decisions come from love, they align with your highest self. When they come from fear, they align with your smallest self. The contrast becomes clear once you begin to practice awareness. Have you ever made a decision from fear and felt the heaviness that followed? Have you ever made a decision from truth and felt the relief that came with it? These sensations are signals. The body knows the difference between contraction and expansion. The soul speaks through these sensations. Trusting your soul also transforms your relationship with uncertainty. When fear dominates, uncertainty feels threatening. But when the soul leads, uncertainty becomes a space of creation. You realize that you do not need to know everything to move forward. You do not need to have the next 5 steps figured out. You only need to be aligned with the present step. The rest unfolds naturally. This is one of the greatest freedoms you can experience. The realization that the future does not need to be controlled, only met with awareness. As trust deepens, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Your intuition becomes sharper. You see patterns more clearly. You sense when something is wrong before the mind can articulate it. You know when something is right, even if it scares you. Opportunities begin to appear, not because life changed suddenly, but because you changed the way you perceive life. When you stop seeing through the lens of fear, you begin to see through the lens of truth. This clarity is one of the gifts of trusting your soul. Fear loses power gradually, not instantly. It weakens each time you refuse to obey it, each time you choose presence over panic, each time you act from your truth instead of your patterns. Eventually, fear becomes something you can walk with rather than something you run from. You acknowledge it, you understand it, but you do not follow it. This is true inner freedom. Not the absence of fear, but the absence of obedience to fear. Trusting your soul is ultimately an act of remembering. The soul has always been guiding you, even in moments you felt most lost. When you felt drawn to something for reasons you could not explain, that was the soul. When you felt discomfort that pushed you to leave a situation misaligned with your truth, that was the soul. When you felt a quiet, inner certainty that contradicted fear, that was the soul. The more you honor these signals, the more aligned your life becomes. Life begins to expand when you choose soul over fear. Decisions become clearer, relationships become more authentic. Challenges become opportunities for growth rather than threats. The inner world becomes calmer, steadier, more grounded. You begin to understand yourself not as a collection of fears, but as a conscious being capable of deep wisdom, courage, and compassion. This understanding changes everything. The soul is not a mysterious force outside you. It is the deepest dimension of who you are. Fear is only the shallowest. When you trust the deeper layer, the surface loses control. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, shifting identification from the noisy voice of fear to the silent presence of truth. When this shift happens, fear becomes just another passing phenomenon, not the ruler of your life. If you are reading this and feel something awakening inside you, trust that feeling. It is your soul speaking. It is reminding you that you are more than your fears, more than your past, more than your doubts. It is reminding you that truth lives within you, waiting to be heard. Whenever fear arises, remember, The soul has a larger vision than the mind's worries, and if you listen closely, it will guide you there. If this message helps you walk your path with more clarity and courage, remember to subscribe to the channel so these teachings continue to support your journey. The courage to walk the path of the soul. To follow the voice of your soul is not an easy path. It is simple, but not easy. Simplicity means clarity. The truth is always direct, but difficulty arises because this path requires courage, honesty, and detachment from illusions that the ego clings to. The soul asks you to surrender not to weakness, but to truth. It asks you to walk away from the false comfort of control and the shallow security of conformity. It asks you to face fear directly, not with aggression, but with awareness. This is the kind of courage that Buddhism speaks about, not physical bravery in battle, but inner bravery in silence. The courage to face yourself, the courage to listen when the world screams at you to conform, the courage to stay true to your path even when you walk alone. The world celebrates external courage. People who take risks, conquer markets, climb mountains, face enemies. But internal courage is quieter and far more profound. It is the courage to stop running from what you feel. It is the courage to be still when fear says move. It is the courage to let go when attachment whispers to hold tighter. It is the courage to trust the invisible when the visible collapses. The Buddhist path calls this fearlessness abhaya. Not the absence of fear, but the transcendence of it. A fearless person is not one who never trembles, but one who knows that trembling cannot destroy them. When you begin to follow the voice of your soul, you will be asked to make choices that the mind cannot always justify. You will be drawn toward paths that are uncertain but intuitively right. You may feel called to leave situations, relationships, or environments that no longer align with your truth, even if others do not understand why. You may feel guided to rest when the world tells you to work harder, to speak when everyone expects your silence, or to walk away when staying would be easier. The soul does not follow logic, it follows alignment. It knows that truth is not always comfortable, but is always liberating. In Buddhist teachings, this process of following truth is known as right action, sammakamanta, in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right action is not about moral judgment, but about living from awareness. It means your actions arise not from fear, anger, or greed, but from wisdom and compassion. The soul is the source of this wisdom. Fear is the distortion. To act from fear is to create karma rooted in ignorance. To act from the soul is to create harmony, not only within yourself, but also with the fabric of life. The courage to walk the path of the soul requires humility. You must accept that you do not know everything, that the path may twist in ways the mind cannot predict. You must be willing to say, I don't know, but I trust. The ego hates this. It thrives on control, on certainty, on being right. But the soul lives in flow. It understands that wisdom unfolds gradually, that clarity comes step by step, that truth reveals itself only to those who are present enough to see. The mind wants maps. The soul offers direction only in the moment. The mind demands guarantees. The soul gives only faith. Many people spend their lives waiting for fear to disappear before they act. But fear never disappears completely. You grow through it, not before it. The secret is not to wait for confidence, but to move from conviction. When your heart knows something is true, you act, even trembling. This trembling is not a sign of weakness, but of transformation. It means your old self is dissolving and your new self is emerging. Every spiritual step involves some level of uncertainty because it leads you beyond the known. The known feels safe, but it is also limited. The unknown feels frightening, but it is infinite. Courage is not a grand gesture. It is made of small moments of honesty. It is when you admit to yourself that something no longer feels right. It is when you tell the truth, even if your voice shakes. It is when you decide to forgive, even though resentment feels justified. It is when you choose silence instead of defending your ego. It is when you choose peace instead of being right. These are the moments when the soul speaks and the ego resists. Fear says, protect yourself. The soul says, trust yourself. In the modern world, people are taught to build walls, emotional walls, psychological walls, social masks, to hide their vulnerability. But true courage is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the acceptance of it. When you are willing to be open, to be seen as you are, to feel deeply, you align with your soul. The heart is not weak because it feels. It is strong because it remains open despite pain. Fear tries to close it. The soul keeps it open. Every time you choose openness over defense, you strengthen the bridge to your soul. Buddhism teaches that fear thrives on attachment and ignorance. The more you cling to what changes, the more you suffer. The more you resist impermanence, the more anxiety you feel. Courage, therefore, is not about conquering external enemies, but internal attachments. To let go requires immense bravery. Letting go of control, of outcomes, of expectations, of identities, of the need to be understood. These are acts of true spiritual heroism. The Buddha himself demonstrated this courage when he left behind luxury, status, and security to seek truth. He was not fleeing the world, but transcending its illusions. To walk the path of the soul, you must be willing to disappoint the ego. You must be willing to lose what is false in order to find what is real. You must accept that fear will arise at every stage, but its presence does not mean you are lost. It means you are evolving. Each fear you face dissolves another illusion, another layer of conditioning. Fear teaches where attachment still exists. The soul uses fear as a mirror to show you what is unresolved. When you stop running from fear and instead observe it, you transform it. Observation is alchemy. Awareness turns fear into wisdom. The courage to listen to your soul is also the courage to be misunderstood. Others may not see what you see or feel what you feel. They may interpret your silence as weakness, your peace as passivity, your detachment as indifference. But you must remember that your journey is yours alone. The soul does not seek validation, it seeks truth. The Buddha said that each person must be their own lamp. This means you must find your own inner light and follow it, even if no one else understands. The approval of the world can never replace the approval of your own conscience. When you listen to your soul, your life may begin to change in unexpected ways. You may find yourself drawn to new directions, new people, new environments that reflect your vibration. You may also see old structures fall apart. This is not punishment, it is purification. When truth enters, everything false begins to crumble. The ego calls it loss, the soul calls it liberation. The process may feel painful, but it is necessary. You cannot carry old illusions into new awareness. Each layer of fear that dissolves makes room for deeper peace. The courage to live from your soul also transforms how you view failure. From the perspective of fear, failure is humiliation. From the perspective of the soul, failure is refinement. Each so-called mistake becomes a teacher. Each disappointment becomes a doorway to deeper understanding. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Everything changes. When you stop clinging to outcomes, you begin to see that nothing is wasted. Even pain becomes sacred when it awakens consciousness. Fear wants to avoid pain. The soul uses it as a path. Many spiritual traditions speak of surrender, but surrender is often misunderstood as giving up. In truth, surrender means releasing resistance. It means aligning with life rather than fighting it. The soul is always in harmony with the flow of existence. Fear is always in conflict with it. When you surrender to your soul, you stop forcing outcomes and start allowing truth. You stop trying to control the river and instead learn to float with it. This does not mean passivity, it means trust. It means understanding that life is not happening to you, but through you. The courage to trust life arises from the realization that you are not separate from it. The same intelligence that makes flowers bloom and stars move also animates your breath. When you listen to your soul, you tune into this intelligence. You realize that you're not an isolated being struggling in chaos, but a conscious expression of the universe's rhythm. Fear tells you that you are alone and powerless. The soul reminds you that you are connected and guided. Once you see this, courage becomes natural because you no longer carry the illusion of separation. Every great teacher, from the Buddha to modern spiritual masters, has spoken of this inner transformation. The outer world may remain uncertain, but the inner world becomes unshakable. When you act from the soul, your peace no longer depends on external stability. You may lose things, face criticism, endure solitude, yet something within remains untouched. That is the power of living from truth. You stop asking life to be easy and start asking to be conscious. Fear asks for comfort. The soul asks for awakening. Courage also means compassion. It means recognizing that others are ruled by fear just as you once were. When you see someone acting with anger, defensiveness, or control, you realize they are listening to fear, not evil. This understanding softens judgment. It allows forgiveness. Compassion is not weakness, it is clarity. It is seeing beyond behavior to the pain beneath it. When you live from the soul, you begin to radiate this understanding naturally. Your presence becomes healing because it carries peace, not reaction. In time, courage becomes effortless. It is no longer something you have to generate. It becomes your nature. You realize that listening to your soul is not a special practice, but a way of being. The mind becomes quieter, fear becomes lighter, and presence becomes deeper. You begin to live in alignment with what the Buddha called Dharma, the natural order of truth. Everything begins to move harmoniously, not because life becomes perfect, but because your perception changes. You see meaning where you once saw chaos. You see opportunity where you once saw threat. You see lessons where you once saw loss. The more you live from this space, the more synchronicities appear, moments that remind you that you are guided. The right people appear, the right opportunities arise, the right words come at the right time. These are not coincidences. They are reflections of alignment. The universe speaks to the soul through signs and intuition. Fear cannot hear them because it is too loud. Stillness allows you to recognize them. You begin to trust the flow of life because you can see its intelligence operating through every detail. True courage, in the end, is about faith. Not blind faith in external powers, but living faith in your own inner truth. It is the faith that says, even if I do not see the entire path, I will take this step. It is the faith that says, even if fear screams, I will listen to the quiet voice within. It is the faith that says, even if I fall, I will rise again because I know who I am. Fear doubts, faith remembers. Fear hesitates, faith moves. Fear contracts, faith expands. And every act of faith strengthens your connection with the soul until fear becomes nothing more than background noise in the vastness of your awareness. So you walk, not perfectly, not without moments of doubt or hesitation, but with devotion to truth. You walk because the soul calls you, not because you understand everything, but because you feel it is right. You walk because you know deep down that peace lives on the other side of fear. You walk because you remember that you came into this life not to obey fear, but to awaken through it. The courage to listen to your soul is the beginning of real freedom. It is the moment you stop being a prisoner of fear and become a student of truth. Every act of courage brings you closer to authenticity, and authenticity brings peace. The Buddha said that peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. This is not a metaphor. It is literal truth. Peace cannot be found in possessions, approval, or achievements. It arises when you stop betraying your soul. When you act, speak, and live in harmony with your inner truth, peace naturally fills the space where fear once lived. You cannot fake it. You can only awaken it. If you can listen even now, there is a voice within you that whispers softly beyond all the noise. It says, "Trust, continue. You are guided." That is your soul. It has never left you. Even when you doubted, even when you fell, even when you forgot, it was there. To live from the soul is to return to this remembrance again and again until remembrance becomes your way of life. Fear will still knock at your door, but you will no longer invite it in. You will smile at it, thank it for its lessons, and continue walking. If this reflection inspires you to trust your path and overcome fear, remember to subscribe to the channel so these teachings can keep guiding your journey toward peace and truth. Silence is the language of the soul. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not absence. Silence is not the void that the fearful mind imagines when noise fades away. Silence is the presence of everything that truly matters. It is the place where the soul speaks, the space where wisdom breathes, and the dimension where fear cannot survive. To the untrained mind, silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening, because it exposes what has been hidden. It reveals the turbulence of the thoughts we have refused to feel and the emotions we have tried to escape. Yet in Buddhism, silence is not to be feared. It is the gateway to awakening. Only in silence does truth become audible. Only in stillness does the soul emerge from beneath the noise of the mind. Human beings live surrounded by noise, not only external sounds but internal noise. The endless commentary, the self-criticism, the worries, the rehearsed conversations, the imagined futures. This mental noise creates a barrier between who we think we are and who we truly are. It is not the world that separates us from our soul, but the chatter within our own minds. Fear feeds this chatter. It tells stories about what could go wrong, what people might think, what we might lose, what we have to prove. It fills the mind with narratives so persistent that silence begins to feel unnatural. But silence is the natural state of being. The noise is the intrusion. When you sit in silence, at first you may hear the chaos that has been living inside you. The mind resists. It throws thoughts at you like waves crashing against rocks. It tries to distract you, to make you stand up, to make you check your phone, to make you do anything other than face yourself. But this resistance is only fear disguising itself as restlessness. The mind fears silence because silence dissolves illusion. The mind's authority depends on your constant attention, on your identification with thought. When you sit in silence and simply observe, you withdraw that attention. You stop feeding the mind's stories, and gradually something extraordinary happens and the thoughts continue, but you are no longer inside them. You are watching them. You are the awareness behind them. That awareness is your soul. Silence reveals what words can never describe. It is not something you achieve. It is something you uncover. Beneath all the movement, beneath all the thinking, beneath all the wanting, silence has always been there. The soul does not speak in language, it speaks in knowing. It communicates through intuition, presence, feeling. When you are quiet enough, you begin to hear it, not as sound, but as clarity. It does not shout, it does not argue, it does not justify. It simply knows. In Buddhist meditation, silence is not just the absence of sound, but the absence of identification with thought. It is not about making the mind blank, but about seeing the mind for what it is, a tool, not the master. When you are silent, you begin to notice how thoughts arise and pass, how emotions come and go, how sensations appear and dissolve. Everything becomes transparent. You begin to see impermanence directly. You begin to realize that what you thought was you, the stories, the fears, the labels, are merely movements in consciousness. And behind all of them is stillness. The same stillness that was present when you were a child, the same stillness that will be there when your body ages, the same stillness that never changes. That stillness is your soul. Fear cannot live in silence because fear depends on noise. It needs constant mental activity to survive. It thrives on anticipation and memory, on analysis and projection. When you bring awareness to the present moment, fear loses its anchor. In silence, there is no past to regret and no future to dread. There is only now, and in the now, fear cannot exist. This is why silence is so powerful. It is not passive. It is transformative. It dissolves the illusions that give fear its strength. When you learn to be silent, you begin to listen differently. Not just to yourself, but to the world. You start to hear the sound of the wind, the rhythm of your breath, the texture of a moment. Life reveals itself in small details that are invisible to a noisy mind. Silence expands perception. You begin to see the sacred in the ordinary. You begin to feel the pulse of life in everything around you. This is not imagination. It is awareness purified of distortion. When the mind stops shouting, reality becomes luminous. There is a story in Buddhist tradition about a disciple who asked the master for the essence of enlightenment. The master simply sat in silence. The disciple waited, thinking perhaps the master did not understand the question. Minutes passed, then hours. Finally, the master opened his eyes and said, "This silence is the answer." The disciple did not understand at first, but years later, after practicing meditation, he realized what the master meant. Enlightenment is not a thought, not a conclusion, not a belief. It is the direct experience of being. Silence is that experience. It is not the silence of suppression, but of liberation. The mind believes silence means nothing is happening. But in silence, everything is happening. Transformation occurs beneath the surface. Awareness deepens. Old patterns dissolve. The roots of fear lose their grip. The nervous system relaxes. The heart opens. The soul begins to lead. This inner process is subtle but profound. Just as seeds sprout in darkness before they break through the soil, spiritual awakening begins in silence before it becomes visible in your life. The more you honor silence, the more powerfully your life aligns with truth. In daily life, silence does not always mean sitting still or meditating. You can carry silence within you, even in the midst of noise. This is the silence of presence, the ability to remain anchored in awareness no matter what happens externally. You may be speaking, working, walking, or listening, but inside, there is stillness. You are not lost in thought. You are grounded in being. This is what the Buddha called inner composure. It is the essence of mindfulness, the capacity to remain undisturbed by the mind's fluctuations. Silence also teaches humility. When you stop talking, you begin to see how much of what is said in the world is unnecessary. You realize that most conversations are defenses of the ego, attempts to prove, justify, or control. Silence strips this away. It shows you how much energy is wasted in maintaining illusions. When you become comfortable with silence, you no longer need to fill it. You no longer fear it. You begin to understand that truth does not need explanation. It only needs embodiment. Fear often uses words as a shield. It keeps you talking, planning, explaining, analyzing, because as long as you are speaking, you are not listening. Silence breaks this pattern. It exposes what lies beneath the words. It invites you to meet yourself without distraction. That meeting can be uncomfortable at first, because you come face to face with your own shadow, the repressed emotions, the unhealed wounds, the unresolved fears. But this confrontation is healing. In silence, nothing can hide for long. You see everything clearly, and what is seen with clarity loses its power to control you. Awareness purifies by its very presence. In Buddhist psychology, the mind is often compared to a monkey, restless, jumping from one branch to another. Meditation and silence are the ways to calm this monkey. When the mind becomes quiet, the natural state of peace arises. You cannot create peace, you can only uncover it. Peace is what remains when fear stops talking. The soul is peace itself. It has never been disturbed. It has only been covered by noise. To cultivate silence, you must create space in your life. This may mean spending time alone, reducing unnecessary distractions, disconnecting from constant stimulation. Solitude is not isolation. It is communion with your deeper self. The Buddha often retreated into solitude to recharge his awareness. He knew that silence renews perception. When you withdraw from noise, even temporarily, you begin to sense life more deeply. You begin to hear your soul's whisper again. The fear of silence comes from the fear of facing yourself. But once you do, you realize that silence is not empty. It is full of love. It is full of compassion, full of wisdom, full of presence. It is the language of the soul and the resting place of consciousness. The mind finds identity in words. The soul finds identity in silence. When you embrace silence, you no longer need to prove who you are. You simply are. One of the greatest gifts of silence is clarity. When you are silent, the fog of confusion lifts. You begin to see things as they are, not as you wish or fear them to be. Decisions that once felt complicated become simple because you are no longer choosing from fear, but from awareness. Silence sharpens intuition. It reveals what truly matters. It aligns you with truth. Many of life's most important realizations come not through thinking, but through silent knowing. Fear will always try to pull you back into noise. It will tell you that silence is unproductive, that you are wasting time, that you are falling behind. But silence is not inactivity, it is inner alignment. When your actions come from silence, they carry more power, more clarity, more love. A few words spoken from silence can heal. 1,000 spoken from fear can harm. A single decision made from silence can transform your destiny. Silence is not withdrawal from life, it is preparation for it. The Buddha's final teaching before his death was simple. Be a light unto yourself. To be a light unto yourself is to live from awareness, and awareness is born in silence. You do not become enlightened by adding more knowledge, but by removing noise. The truth is already within you. Silence reveals it. This is why meditation is central in Buddhism. It is the art of returning to silence again and again until it becomes your natural state. When you live in silence, even for moments each day, you begin to notice how fear loses interest in you. It cannot manipulate a mind that no longer reacts. It cannot control a heart that no longer resists. Silence makes you unshakable, not because you suppress emotion, but because you see through it. You see that fear is just energy passing through awareness. You allow it, you watch it, you release it. Silence becomes your refuge, a temple that travels with you wherever you go. Over time, silence changes your entire relationship with life. You stop rushing. You stop needing to control everything. You begin to trust the natural rhythm of existence. You move slower but with greater depth. You listen more and speak less. You observe without judgment. You act with intention. You love without attachment. You forgive without demand. This is the beauty of a silent heart. It does not seek to dominate life. It harmonizes with it. When silence becomes your foundation, fear becomes irrelevant. Fear depends on time, on the past and the future. But silence is timeless. In silence, you realize that everything you have ever searched for, peace, love, clarity, strength is already here. It was never missing. It was only drowned out by noise. The soul has been waiting patiently beneath the mind's chaos, whispering softly, "I am here." Learning to listen to your soul through silence is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong practice. You will forget and remember, drift and return, fall and rise. But each time you return to silence, you deepen your connection. You become less reactive, more grounded, more compassionate. You begin to live as awareness itself, rather than as the stories it witnesses. And in that state, fear loses all meaning. Ultimately, silence is not the opposite of sound. It is the source of it. Everything arises from silence and returns to it. Every thought, every emotion, every experience, all of them are waves on the ocean of silence. To know yourself as that ocean is to know freedom. You do not need to silence the waves. You only need to remember that you are the ocean. Then, even when life becomes loud, the silence within remains untouched. If these reflections help you reconnect with your inner stillness, remember to subscribe to the channel so you can continue walking this journey of awareness and peace with us. Freedom begins when you listen beyond fear. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty. It is not the end of challenges, nor the elimination of emotions. Freedom, in its truest form, is the ability to face everything life brings without losing your inner peace. It is the recognition that fear, pain, loss, and uncertainty are part of existence, but that none of them can touch the essence of who you are. When you begin to listen beyond fear, when you hear the quiet certainty of the soul instead of the endless noise of the mind, freedom becomes your natural state. It does not need to be achieved. It only needs to be remembered. For in truth, you were never bound except by your own belief in fear. The doors of the cage were always open. You just needed the courage to walk through. The human condition is built around the illusion of separation, the sense that you are a self isolated from the rest of existence. This illusion breeds fear. You fear loss because you think what you love is outside of you. You fear death because you think life is something you possess rather than something you are. You fear failure because you think your worth depends on what you do instead of who you are. But the soul knows differently. The soul knows it is one with life itself, inseparable from the whole. When you listen to the soul, you begin to dissolve the illusion that you are small, temporary, or incomplete. You begin to remember that what you call life is not something happening to you. It is you. Fear loses its foundation the moment you recognize this. Buddhism teaches that clinging and aversion are the roots of suffering. Fear is born from both. You cling to what you want, and you resist what you do not want. You chase pleasure and run from pain. You attach your peace to circumstances and then suffer when they change. But everything changes. Even joy, when clung to, becomes a source of pain because you fear losing it. The soul, however, rests in the truth of impermanence. It knows that nothing needs to last for it to be sacred. It does not need to hold on to moments because it is one with the flow of all moments. When you live from this understanding, fear loses its grip because there is nothing left to defend. Listening beyond fear requires trust. Not blind trust in outcomes, but deep trust in life itself. This trust does not come from naive optimism, but from direct experience. When you spend time in silence, when you observe your thoughts without reacting, when you begin to see how fear rises and falls like waves, you start to realize that beneath every wave is an unshakable stillness. That stillness has never left you. It has been present through every triumph and every fall, through every heartbreak and every recovery. It is the silent witness of all your experiences. That witness is your soul. It has no fear because it has no beginning and no end. To listen beyond fear means to anchor yourself in that witness, to live as awareness itself rather than as the temporary movements within it. Most people think freedom will come when circumstances finally align, when they earn enough, love enough, control enough, when life finally stops hurting. But that day never comes, because life is dynamic, ever-changing. The pursuit of perfect conditions is the pursuit of illusion. Real freedom is unconditional. It does not depend on external peace. It creates internal peace regardless of what happens outside. The soul's freedom is invincible because it is rooted in truth, not circumstance. When you listen beyond fear, you begin to experience this unconditioned peace. The mind will resist. It will say that you need to worry to stay safe, that you need control to survive. It will create stories about what might happen if you let go. But every story fear tells is a distortion. The mind confuses control with safety. But control is the very thing that blocks peace. The more you try to control life, the more fear you feel, because life will never fully obey you. The soul, on the other hand, flows. It does not try to dominate, it harmonizes. It knows that even chaos serves awakening. It knows that even pain hides blessings. It trusts the wisdom behind uncertainty. Freedom begins when you stop arguing with what is. When you stop demanding that reality conform to your preferences, peace arises naturally. This does not mean passivity. It means participation without resistance. You still act, but you no longer act from fear. You respond from clarity. You make choices, but you no longer attach your identity to their outcomes. You live, but you no longer fight life. In Buddhism, this is the heart of liberation. Nirvana is not somewhere else. It is the extinguishing of resistance in this very moment. It is the realization that you were never separate from truth. To listen beyond fear, you must train your perception. Fear narrows perception. It makes the mind obsess over threats, over what could go wrong. The soul expands perception. It shows you the bigger picture. When fear dominates, you see only fragments. When awareness dominates, you see the whole. This shift in perception transforms everything. You stop seeing problems and start seeing lessons. You stop seeing enemies and start seeing mirrors. You stop seeing endings and start seeing transformations. The world outside does not change. The way you see it does. And that change of vision is freedom. The practice of listening beyond fear is essentially the practice of mindfulness. To be mindful is to be aware without judgment, to witness without attachment. When fear arises, the mindful person does not fight it or obey it. They observe it. They say, "Ah, fear is here." They breathe. They watch its sensations in the body, its thoughts in the mind, its energy moving through. They do not label it as good or bad. They simply allow it. And as they allow it, it loses density. It dissolves in the light of awareness. You cannot be both fully conscious and fully afraid. The two cannot coexist for long, because awareness reveals that fear is just movement, not reality. The mind constantly creates images of danger, but danger exists mostly in imagination. The present moment is almost always safe. The body breathes, the heart beats, the ground supports you. Fear lives in the space between what is and what might be. When you return to now, fear disappears. The soul lives only in now. It has no memory, no expectation, no regret. It is the pure awareness of existence itself. When you listen from that awareness, life becomes simple again. You stop living in mental projections and begin living in reality. Freedom also means forgiveness. Forgiving yourself for believing fear for so long, forgiving others who acted from their own fears. When you understand how deeply fear governs human behavior, compassion replaces judgment. You realize that most suffering in the world comes from people who are listening to fear rather than to their souls. You stop blaming and start understanding. Compassion is not indulgence, it is clarity. When you see clearly, you cannot hate. You recognize yourself in others. You recognize their struggles as your own. The Buddha said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but by love." Love, in this sense, is awareness free from fear. To listen beyond fear is to listen with love. Love does not mean sentimental affection. It means openness, acceptance, unity. When you love, you no longer build walls between yourself and life. You let life move through you. You trust that even when it hurts, it is guiding you toward greater wisdom. You realize that what you resist in others reflects what you fear in yourself. Listening beyond fear allows you to meet the world with tenderness instead of tension. Another aspect of freedom is authenticity. Fear teaches you to play roles, to hide behind masks, to become what others expect. The soul teaches you to be real. It asks you to speak your truth without aggression, to act with integrity, even when it costs approval. The soul does not need to impress. It needs to express. When you listen beyond fear, you no longer live to satisfy expectations. You live to express your essence. Authenticity is the natural expression of the soul, and the more authentic you become, the less fear can survive, because fear feeds on pretense. When you no longer pretend, fear has nothing to hold on to. The freedom that arises from authenticity is profound. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop diluting your light to make others comfortable. You stop abandoning yourself for acceptance. You begin to realize that true belonging can only come when you belong to yourself first. When you listen to the soul, you discover that the world you were trying to please never existed. It was a projection of your own fears. The moment you withdraw your energy from that illusion, you reclaim your power. Listening beyond fear also means listening to your intuition, even when it leads you away from comfort. Fear wants the predictable. Intuition leads to the unknown. Yet the unknown is where your highest potential lives. The greatest moments of your life, love, creation, awakening, all began with stepping into what you did not know. The mind cannot plan the miracles the soul prepares. It can only surrender to them. When you trust your intuition, you are trusting life itself. You are saying, "I am willing to walk in darkness knowing the light will guide me." This is ultimate freedom, to walk without fear of falling. Many people believe freedom is about external choices, but internal freedom precedes all external ones. You can have every material liberty and still be imprisoned by your thoughts. You can live under external limitation and still feel boundless inside. Freedom begins and ends in consciousness. It is not about what you can do, it is about who you are being. When you identify with fear, you are bound. When you identify with awareness, you are free. The difference is invisible, but life-changing. To live beyond fear does not mean you never feel it again. Fear will arise. It is part of the human system, but it will no longer define you. You will see it, thank it for its message, and let it pass. You will not let it decide your life. You will listen, not to the voice that says, "What if I fail?" but to the voice that whispers, "You are capable, and even if you fail, you will grow." You will not listen to the voice that says, "You are not enough," but to the one that says, "You were whole before you were born." You will not listen to the voice that says, "You must protect yourself," but to the one that says, "You are safe in truth." Every moment you choose awareness over fear, you strengthen your soul's presence in your life. Each choice builds trust, and as trust grows, life begins to unfold with a sense of grace. Things still happen, pain, loss, joy, success, but you no longer swing between extremes. You stay centered. You respond rather than react. You feel deeply, but do not drown. This is what the Buddha meant by the middle way, not a compromise, but balance. It is the freedom that arises when you are no longer trapped in the polarities of fear and desire. Freedom beyond fear is the natural flowering of consciousness. It does not need to be forced. The seed of it is already within you. Every time you meditate, every time you breathe consciously, every time you choose truth over illusion, you water that seed. One day, without warning, you will notice that what once terrified you no longer holds power. The situations may still arise, but your reaction is different. You meet them with calm. You meet them with compassion. You meet them with silence. That is when you realize freedom was never about changing the world, but about changing the way you see. The soul has always been whispering to you, in moments of peace, in moments of beauty, in moments of heartbreak. It has been saying, you are more than this fear. You are not what happened to you. You are not what might happen next. You are the awareness in which all of this happens. Listening beyond fear is simply listening to that voice. It has been patient. It has never judged you for forgetting. It only waits for your return. And the moment you turn your attention inward, it meets you instantly, like a long-lost friend who never stopped loving you. Freedom is not in the future. It is not waiting for you after enlightenment, after success, after healing. Freedom is here. In this breath, in this awareness, in this moment, when you stop believing the mind's stories and start seeing with the eyes of the soul. It is in the moment you stop running, the moment you stop hiding, the moment you choose presence over projection. It is here, now, always. You may ask, how do I stay free when fear returns? The answer is awareness. Return to the breath. Return to silence. Return to the witness. Do not fight fear, recognize it. Say gently, ah, fear, you have come again. Watch it with compassion. Let it pass. It cannot harm you when you see it clearly. Awareness is light, and fear is only darkness, pretending to be something real. You do not need to destroy darkness. You only need to bring light. As you deepen in this understanding, you will begin to live differently. You will speak less, but say more. You will move slower, but with more intention. You will seek less approval because you already feel whole. You will no longer chase peace because you realize you are peace. This is the paradox of spiritual awakening. When you stop seeking, you find what was never missing. In the end, to listen beyond fear is to return to yourself. It is to live as the consciousness that witnesses everything but is bound by nothing. It is to walk through the world as love in motion, calm, compassionate, and unafraid. This freedom does not make you indifferent, it makes you deeply alive. You feel everything, but you cling to nothing. You give everything, but you expect nothing. You move with life, not against it. This is what the Buddha meant by liberation. It is not escape, it is embodiment. It is not isolation, it is union. When you live in this awareness, your very presence becomes a teaching. You no longer need to convince anyone of truth, you embody it. People feel peace around you because you have stopped radiating fear. Your silence becomes healing. Your actions become examples. Your life becomes a reflection of the freedom you found within. This is the ultimate purpose of spiritual awakening, not to escape humanity, but to illuminate it. Freedom is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of real living. It is where fear ends and life truly starts. It is where you stop existing and start being. And once you have tasted this freedom, you can never forget it. Even if fear returns, even if the mind shouts, you will know, beyond all doubt, that peace is deeper, that truth is stronger, that the soul is eternal. If these words help you awaken the freedom within and live beyond fear, remember to subscribe to the channel so that this journey of awareness and peace continues to grow together.